businesses. So just to kind of give you a little flavor of the infrastructure background that we're bringing to the table today. But my first question to you is, how's everything going in Michigan related to COVID-19? What's the current status that the state finds itself in?
Sure. So first off, I really appreciate, let me make sure you guys can hear that. So I really appreciate the invitation to be able to participate in this conversation today, and certainly thank everyone for doing their part in staying safe. Hope that everyone's families are doing well. And we're certainly all in this together as a state. And I hope that everyone is recognizing that what we are, when I say we, I mean Governor Whitmer and I and our whole administration, our first responsibility is about protecting and promoting public health and public safety. And so it's with that in mind that we're making every choice that we've had to make. COVID-19 showed up in Michigan in terms of our confirmed positive test results for it on March 10th. So this is our 9th week in this reality. And because so many people in Michigan, the overwhelming majority of people, frankly, have been, mindful of staying home and practicing social distancing, we have certainly seen the rate in which our cases are growing across the state in aggregate. The rate of deaths has begun to plateau. And we've seen much lower numbers as far as, on a given day. I think it was on Sunday, we had the fewest deaths to be reported in several weeks. And so that's a sign that things are trending in the right direction. It's a sign that the way that people stepped up, the way that businesses stepped up, the way that our hospital system stepped up, they enabled us to be able to have the surge capacity to handle an increase in cases and now to manage that decline. As we think about going forward, what it means to reconstruct or to re-engage certain activities or certain parts of our economy, we now have some infrastructure in place to keep a close eye on that case, how the cases are changing, on how deaths are changing, on our testing capacity, and on our public health system capacity. And that's enabling us to do things that the governor announced this afternoon, which is giving the okay for certain parts of the state to be able to re-engage in certain types of activity. And so that means that we're on the right path. With that being said, we still need to be careful and still need to be cautious. We're not saying that everything needs to go back to the way it was on March 9th in Michigan, and it's not really clear that we're going to be able to do that for a while without an effective antiviral treatment or without a vaccine that's been tested and approved. So we're still asking folks to stay vigilant. We're asking employers to stay vigilant, to be mindful of the safety of their employees, as well as those who are consuming their services. We're mindful of the fact that different jobs in different industries have different risk profiles. And so as we think about what it means to re-engage in a particular line of work, whether it's construction and infrastructure or services delivery, making sure that the sort of protocols that are in place for workplace protections are sound from a science perspective, that they're followed by employers, and that people are protected at work, and that they're able to have the confidence that they'll be safe. Because at the end of the day, this is what this is all about. How can we ensure that people are confident when they leave their homes, go to work, or to go consume the services, that they will feel safe?
So one of the things that stemmed from the Department of Homeland Security's advisory on essential businesses was both road construction and materials manufacturing being deemed essential businesses, and you sort of touched on that a moment ago. The other aspect of the why that's critical is simultaneously Congress is working on a reauthorization of the highway bill, the surface transportation bill back in DC, which is due to expire October 1. We see it as being incredibly important to ensure that these businesses are continuing to work out on the road so that we're prepared in Michigan to get the job done once this new legislation is enacted into law. Is that something that you're seeing across the state and something that your administration would be supportive of?
Absolutely. So, as was mentioned in the intro, infrastructure is literally in the DNA of this administration. And so that continues to be important because, if you think about it, how we talked about job functions when we were talking about our stay home, stay safe orders, we actually never talked about dichotomy of essential versus non-essential, which is the type of thing you heard in a lot of other states and in the federal government. We talked about it in terms of job functions that are critical to protecting and sustaining life. And our infrastructure is critical to being able for people to be able to protect life, to sustain life, to be able to do things that people need to do, as far as, you know, getting to the grocery store and getting to the pharmacy and doing all these really essential things. So infrastructure is really critical. We happen to have, you know, I believe, and I am not biased, some of the best professionals in the world who work in this space, some of the best engineers, some of the best technologists, some of the best technicians, some of the best skilled labor. And that's just a really important part of Michigan's DNA. So certainly we, and I think in our administration, you saw that we put forward plans to push forward on infrastructure, you know, by any means necessary, which is what we did before this process struck with our bonding proposal, for example. We certainly do support through our federal delegation, much more investment from the federal level from an infrastructure perspective. We have Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence, part of our congressional delegation, who's on that appropriations subcommittee, and she knows that that is important to us. And so as the feds consider what will be part of not just that infrastructure bill, but also part of the coronavirus response packages that are going to come out periodically, including the one that's being negotiated right now, that has potential to have significant aid to states, we think that needs to be part of that puzzle.
That's great. Well, we appreciate that, and any support that your administration can push towards DC would be much appreciated as well. You and I actually had a chance to chat a little bit last year at one of the meetings of the National Lieutenant Governors Association about work zone safety. And had COVID not occurred this year, we would have celebrated National Work Zone Awareness Week actually in Michigan with a fantastic event. That event actually is going to be pushed till next year. But work zone safety is an area that's super close to the hearts of all of our members across the country. It's our members are the men and women who are out there in the work zone working every day to make sure that those construction zones are safe for not just the workers but for the motorists transversing them as well. Is work zone safety an area that is a focus historically to the governor and to yourself? And do you see areas that we might be able to work together going forward?
I do. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And if for no other reason, this notion again of work zone or I'll which I think is a close relative of just workplace safety. I think people are going to be more mindful of the dynamics of workplace safety than perhaps they ever been. And so while workplace safety, I think, was sort of understood always from a road construction perspective, I think the sort of more holistic mindset about that this pandemic has really charged all of us with, I think is going to create more space and opportunity to think about what it means to be safe in a work zone. And what the different sort of threats that may be present the threats to safety that may be present in different types of work zones. So I think there is an opportunity there. And I think this also is an area where we need to think about the fact that, in the context of this pandemic response, it has led us to a place of a broadened policy imagination. And I think that broadened imagination needs to apply to how we're keeping people safe at work as well.
Great. One area that we're beginning to see emerge in certain states, I haven't seen it in Michigan yet, and hopefully it does not become a trend, is in Alabama, there was a bill filed in the state legislature to use some of the gas tax revenue to help COVID-related non-infrastructure, non-transportation projects because they see it as a revenue line. So I just want to, caution states to not start utilizing dedicated transportation funds from gas taxes and sales taxes for other items, especially because we need to also focus on ensuring that states have their equitable match ready for when the federal government enacts their new highway bill.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's something that our team can take a look at to make sure we're thinking about it in the right way.
Okay, great. Hey, Michael, as we go along, are there any questions in the chat box?
Yeah, we have a couple. Why don't we go ahead and just let them, I'll just go ahead and read it. One of them is, we know MDOT and the industry has launched the Michigan Work Zone Safety Task Force in October 2018. but what type of legislation is being considered and or put into place to provide regular work zone law enforcement?
I think we have someone from DIAT on who might be better able to answer that question directly.
Okay.
Ma'am, Dot, excuse me.
Okay. Another question that came up is, do you see any risks in 2020 and 2021 transportation funding in Michigan because of revenue declines?
I mean, the revenue declines are real. Folks may have seen the news from Friday's consensus revenue estimating conference here in Michigan. Just like every other state in the country, given again that people and businesses were responsive to the stay home, stay safe orders, we saw significant declines in revenue, sales tax, and gas tax. And I think that it's going to lead to some tough conversations and negotiations on the budget for this fiscal year and next fiscal year at a minimum. But I do think there may likely be some long-term impacts. What I would say at this point, though, is we understand that infrastructure investment is going to be critical to the success of the state of Michigan. Like, there's a reason why we came into office with a commitment to that, because we know that these are investments that need to be made, and so we need to figure out a path to do them. We can figure out a path to do them. Now, we are existing in this reality right now of dealing with this pandemic, and the lingering impact of this pandemic is going to be with us for a long time. So the sort of structure of that may look different. We may have to get more creative with where that funding comes from. We may have to intensify our federal advocacy, like we're trying to do. We feel like we're trying to do right now to make sure that we can draw down a maximum amount of funds, because the feds don't have nearly the same restrictions that we do when it comes to needing to balance the budget and things like that. So we're going to try our best to make sure we can still make those investments in some form. Is Jeff Cranston, are you on?
Yeah, I'm on. Yeah.
Okay, can you take that first question for me, please?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, as you guys probably know, there hasn't been a great deal of interest demonstrated in the legislature on this issue. In 2019, as you probably all know, we had a couple of deaths in work zones, 2 people in private industry, 1 on a state trunk line, 1 on a local road, and a third person, an MDOT worker, killed doing maintenance work in what was really a freak crash, but just the same, it highlights the danger of the work they do. So while we talk about it and we advocate for it a great deal, it has not risen to the top of the priorities in either one of the chamber's transportation committees. I guess if anything, I'd say we could probably, call on ATSSA's help in terms of the lobby on that kind of thing.
Okay. Our volunteer president, Mr. Greg Driscoll, would like to ask you a question, Lieutenant Governor. Greg?
Yes, sir. I want to just address something you mentioned when Nate had asked about the work zone safety, and was that still a priority and so forth. And you mentioned that the thought of, well, work zone safety is really workplace safety. So yes, it's going to be really important continuing on. But my concern is that I'd like to see a commitment not to let work zone safety get lost in workplace safety, like we've seen roadways get lost in infrastructure. This is a problem that we have. It gets kind of put in this big pot, and then it disappears. So I just wanted to bring that up, that's a concern that I think a lot of us have in both infrastructure, roadway versus infrastructure, and now your mention of roadway safety or work zone safety being into work safety. So any comment on that?
Yeah, I appreciate that as a concern. I mean, I think I'll just say, I guess, flatly, that I think work zone safety is something that we take seriously. And the reason I couple it with workplace safety rhetorically here is because I think we're looking to find ways to build more consensus around these things being a priority. And I think the fact that this pandemic has impacted the way we think about workplaces in a sort of fundamental way, I think it creates more will to have that conversation, both in industry as well as in government. And so that's why I think the sort of including it in that lens is helpful. But I do believe that work zones themselves have an important place and need to be considered in and of themselves. So yeah, I don't want to. I want to assuage concerns on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Hey, Governor, this is Nate again. You spoke a moment ago about the state match and the budget situation. One of the ideas we are advocating for in Congress is for any additional infrastructure funds that might be coming as part of a COVID recovery package, that they be 100% federally funded versus a state match because of these concerns about dwindling revenue lines, gas tax revenue lines at the state level. I think I know the answer to the question, but would that be helpful to Michigan DOT?
This is Jeff again. Yeah, that definitely would. I
Okay.
say we fully support that.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Troy Hagan, our government affairs director, is also on, and he's talked to some of our folks in Washington about that. I don't know if Troy wants to weigh in on that.
Yes, we're fully in support of that, and we did issue a letter to Michigan's congressional delegation on behalf of the governor and Director Adjaba, outlining the financial impact that this has had on our DOT, and requesting that they support AASHTO's ask of Congress.
Okay, great. And we're supportive of that too, so we certainly will continue working together on that. The sort of the final issue area that's a big challenge to our membership is labor and workforce issues. When we survey our members, the biggest challenge that they have, not just in Michigan but nationwide, is finding qualified, skilled workers to both the manufacturing side of our business and for the road construction side of our business. Are you guys undertaking any programs in Michigan to address specifically sort of trade-oriented, blue-collar-oriented construction, manufacturing type jobs?
Absolutely. It's actually been a really core focus of our administration and how I have been spending my time specifically. I mean, things like the Going Pro program, for example, which I kind of helped relaunch, is specifically looking at skilled trades and making those opportunities more visible to people, to know that this is a not only a viable but a credible and pathway to success for people, to success and prosperity, and that those jobs are present in Michigan, and they are there's going to be a lot of them, and so folks need to be able to step up and couple that with, on the policy side, I mean, our Michigan Reconnect program, which actually that is bipartisan legislation that we proposed in our first budget, which passed earlier this year, is really a landmark as far as providing people a tuition-free pathway to get that kind of training, and that we're making that investment as a state because we know that providing pathways to those types of jobs and those skill sets, and enabling people to get those skill sets and that training, is super important to our economy for the short term and the long term. And then I think we have a broad perspective in terms of thinking about what it means to enable more people to be eligible to pursue that training or to have those jobs. And that's where this intersects with some of the work that I've been leading on criminal justice reform and some of the things that we're trying to look at to expand the set of people who have proven themselves to be responsible and able to obtain this training and skills, and to have the aptitude and the will to be able to participate in this workforce. We certainly want to make that pathway available to the Michigan as well. So the short answer to your question is yes. And the long answer to your question is all the stuff I just said. I mean, we really take this very seriously, and we think this is very important to our future.
And then, I'll end with this question of connected and automated vehicles. It's an area that certainly has emerged dramatically over the last 7 or 8 years, and has only accelerated in recent years. We come at the conversation of CAVs from the infrastructure side. So when you have a integrated system that the car is talking to the infrastructure, we're the infrastructure that they're talking to, whether it's the traffic signal or sign or pavement marking, or whatever it might be. And so I was just curious if there's any work being done from your administration on the future of transportation, smart transportation, and connected unmanned vehicle systems.
Yeah, I'll speak at a high level, and I think Jeff can take it down a little more specifically. But the short answer is this is something that's really critical. We think that the state of Michigan needs to continue to assert its role in defining what the future of mobility looks like, and part of that includes really being a leader in terms of setting the standard, and I mean that in both a figurative and a literal sense, and helping to define the standards that will define connected mobility going forward. And that includes what those infrastructure standards are going to be, so to enable vehicle to infrastructure communication and integration. We had a plan in place for this year to have one of the more extensive vehicle to infrastructure demonstrations as part of the auto show before we had to change all those plans. I know that the state of Michigan has been a leader for a while as far as the amount of connected infrastructure and connected highway in particular that's present in our state. We want to continue to build on that lead. So this is really critical to us because I think it's important, again, for sort of smart connected mobility, ways that we can support electrification, and sort of everything in between. So this is really critical, I think, to the future of mobility in the world, and it only makes sense that is based here.
So yeah, all I would add to that is that the governor, took over when we were in the midst of a lot of new things along these lines. The 2016 legislation, which was pioneering really across the country in terms of what it enabled for operations on public roadways, and for MDOT to do more in terms of those partnerships with infrastructure and V2X communications. The Lieutenant Governor has been a huge supporter. He's been to a couple of council on future mobility meetings, and this administration came along and said, let's take what we've been doing and try to do more of it and do it better. And that was the idea behind what we were going to roll out at this year's auto show. So that was a major disappointment, but we're still hopeful we'll be able to do something along those lines in the future. I think the future's still very bright, and Michigan still has to lead in that area, and safety will obviously be, paramount as we do more of these things with connected vehicles.
Well, that's great to hear. We work very closely with the automakers, and especially on spectrum issues and transportation safety issues from a CAV world, and we look forward to working with you guys on that issue as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that wraps it up for us. We want to be respectful of your time as well. I know everything is moving at a light speed these days. So, Michael, if there's no more questions in the chat box, then we'll go ahead and wrap up.
That's all the questions we had.
Great. Well, thanks again, Lieutenant Governor. We really appreciate it, your time and the whole team's time today to meet with our Michigan folks to talk a little bit about infrastructure and technology and safety. And please use our Michigan chapter as a resource as you guys move forward. They're the experts in the field, literally the boots on the ground, making sure that roads are safe throughout the state. So feel free to utilize them as a great educational resource and tool.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the work. Everyone, please stay safe.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you so much.